Alright, is that on? Quick double check. Alright, good. Audio seems to be there. I obviously can't hear what I sound like. Pen. Probably at this point actually plug the hot glue gun in. There. So it'll be nice and hot. Right, how can I actually see? Alright, this seems to be great for actually seeing what I'm... Oh, I can see it here. Alright, great, just... Where's it gone? Okay. Hello. Alright. Hopefully that audio is now working. Say something if you can hear me. Great. Alright, there seems to be a little bit of lag, but nothing terrible. We'll be starting probably in about 5 or 10 minutes. I'd say about 6 o'clock BST. I guess since you're here now, I can just quickly run through. Actually, I will just go and grab an example of what we'll be building. So, this is what I built for a course that I ran in person a couple of weeks ago. A small 2-story building, mostly constructed from foam core with little foam bricks, coffee stirrers and tongue depressors for detail on top, and then as you can see I've started to add some sort of cardboard tiles to the roof. I would have been finishing it off today, but I was getting ready for this. But it gives you roughly an idea of what we're going to start building today is going to look like. So I'll just move that out of the way. Right, check the Discord. This is the first time I've attempted anything like this, and all of the software is doing things, so hopefully it's working. I mean, you can see it. It's also not showing me how many people, if any, are actually watching. Oh. I need to, if I'm going to do this again, I need to look into software to actually help manage the stream. Like, I've seen people using software that does this. Just don't know what it is. Right, yeah, one person watching. I presume you're here from the Warhammer Discord. I don't particularly recognise the username. Ah, yeah. Hello. Alright, a couple of minutes then I will get started. I'm seeing 1757 here. Like I said, I'll be starting around 1800. Alright, one couple of minutes and then started. And I've just noticed that I printed this on sticker paper, not normal paper. That was stupid. I should pay more attention to what I'm actually putting in the printer. Okay. It's now 6 o'clock, so guess I will start. So, today we are going to be building a a watch house. So this is a little 2-story building that's going to have a tower with a little watch post on top. It's mostly going to be made of foam core, which is a material that sort of looks like this. You can find it at basically any craft shop, quite a lot of stationery shops, sign printers. You get quite a lot of signs printed on it, which means quite often if you go to a sign printers and just ask them very kindly, they will give it to you for free. That's what the core of it's going to be built out of. To make things a little easier, I've gone ahead and drawn up some plans, which is what that model was made from. Whilst I've got the plans here, I'll be dumping a link on Twitter, Discord, and in the description to where you can download these plans from. It's about 5 sheets of A4, and eventually you get a whole mess of parts that look like this. Each of the parts is labelled with what it is. This is designed for 5mm foam core. In America it's probably going to be something along the lines of 1/5, I don't know, or 1/5 of an inch. But once you've got it all cut out, which I did earlier off screen so you didn't have to watch me with a pair of scissors, you're going to want to take your foam core and you're going to want to lay out all of the parts like this. You could try and be more economical than this, but I generally find that if that happens, you've got to be very careful with your cuts, because one slip up now ruins 2 parts, not one. And foam core is sufficiently cheap. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to just trace around all of our parts. And then I like to just mark on each what it is, because whilst generally if you know what it is you're building, you can probably figure it out. And as you can tell, my handwriting is terrible. I work at a computer all day, I type things. The only time I'm ever writing stuff by hand is when I need to read it, so apologies for that. But all we need to do, the other thing is that because we're cladding this with, we're going to be cladding this with stuff like coffee stirrers, we don't need to be super accurate. There's going to be an element of finessing it and getting it to fit anyway. This isn't all of the parts, this is about 1/3 of the parts. And this foam core here is from a company called Cathedral and was bought online, and I bought 10 A2 sheets, or A1 sheets I think, about 2-3 years ago, and it lasts you quite a long time. These are just some offcuts that fit nicely on my desk. One of the hardest parts with buying sheets this large is that you end up having to break it down first before you can actually really work with it, unless you've got a huge workspace. But if you buy it from like a stationer's or a craft shop, chances are you'll be buying something closer to A4 sheets, in which case you could just sort of print the pattern off and sort of glue stick it to the foam core. I am keeping an eye on the chat, so if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. I am also aware that I think you're in America, so unfortunately most of my measurements are going to be in millimeters, whereas Americans seem to still like inches. Watching American YouTubers, especially in like the engineering space, is always fun, because it's like, yes, this is now 43/59ths of an inch. It's like, how do you keep up with all these fractions? Metric lets you be very, very lazy. So there, as you can see, we've now got all of our parts drawn out and labelled, and we have then also got 2 other sheets worth of parts. Now, the next step is cutting it all out. You are going to want a sharp hobby knife, and it does need to be sharp. This stuff really loves to tear. The technical word is pawling. I don't know why. I could probably Google it. I haven't. So we're now just going to start cutting all of our parts out and building a little pile of building parts. A rule like this, which if in the UK you can buy from Smiths, really useful because it's clear. You can see through it, and it means that you can line it up with lines very easily. And then it's got 2 sides to it. This side, which is designed for drawing with, and then this side's got a metal strip on it, which means that you can cut right up against it. You've got no concerns with cutting into the ruler. So I can just start to... So you've also probably noticed that this foam core isn't perfectly flat. That's not the end of the world, because we're cutting relatively small pieces out of it. Because we're cutting relatively small pieces out of it, each piece will be pretty flat. So to catch you up, I've just traced all of the parts onto this foam core, and I can now start to carefully cut all the pieces out. But like I said earlier, there is a lot of finessing to do, which means that you don't have to be super accurate. As Bob Ross would say, happy little mistakes. Although it's a lot harder to turn a random mistake into a tree here. Trees actually take quite a lot of effort. I'd be very impressed if someone said, I'm going to build a house, and then somehow managed to turn it into a tree. And that's now twice that I've caught my middle finger. So be careful. Be careful with sharp knives. So in a moment we will begin, once we've got a couple of parts cut out, we can begin putting part of this building together. You will end up with a lot of small parts that look kind of like this. I generally recommend keeping them, although that's because I think in a past life I was a magpie, but they can be very useful for internal bracing, just sticking models to help paint, or whilst you're painting them. However, there are going to be some smaller pieces, and I would say keeping like a bag of scraps is useful, but clear it out like once every month or so. Chances are, if a scrap hasn't been used in about a month, it's probably never going to get used. So, one of the things that makes this design a little more challenging and therefore a little bit more interesting, if we just go back to the picture, the tower intersects with the building itself, and as such we need a shape like that so that it can hook around the shape of the building without hooking around, or without interfering. So whilst previously I was using the ruler just to get these parts freed, I'm just going to do this bit freehand. And then can take the ruler back. So yes, there is a fair amount of cutting involved, but this is why I like lasers so much. They do all this for you, but most people can't afford a laser or don't have access to one, and you can't fit one in your house. And it's a lot harder to sort of make changes to a design on the fly. Like a little bit later we're just going to be looking at the building and deciding, okay, where do we want windows, where do we want the door to be. Whereas if you're going to design something to work with a laser, then all of those decisions have to be made up front. Because you need to be able to tell the computer how you're going to do it. And the same applies to any kind of, sort of computer controlled. These are probably the trickiest parts to cut out, just because of this inset section, but it is really going to help sort of sell it as more than just a box made of foam core. So these two parts are going to make the two long walls of the bottom. And then in a moment we will cut out the other two and we can start gluing stuff down to our baseboard. I've got a hot glue gun just off camera. heating up and it should be ready by now. So as you can see, we've got another sheet that I prepared off camera before the stream, which just contains a bunch more parts. This one is warped in a slightly different direction. Down for a moment. Let's put another piece done. So if you wanted to build something yourself without following plans, it's quite simple. You just need to sort of give it a bit of forethought beforehand, because ultimately you've got to think of stuff as a house is just a box. A house is a box with a tented roof. So you can sort of start to think of it as, alright, well, this is small box, and then put a bigger box on top, and then I'm going to put the roof on top. So this is a material called EPVC. It's lovely, it's cheap, it's thin, it's light, it's relatively rigid, and it makes wonderful bases for terrain. I have just cut a 20cm square of it, ready to go, and then I've taken a wire brush and I've just given it a quick scrub over the top, just to give the glue something to key onto. So, got a hot glue gun. Going to put hot glue on things and it will glue them. And I should warn that this is hot. Sounds stupid, but like the number of days that go by, well, basically every time I get this out I forget at some point that it's hot. But we're just going to start by applying glue to the bottom edge of this foam. And we're just going to stick it right here. Doesn't matter. Yeah, that's the other bit. The glue does stay hot for some time. You can burn yourself on the glue quite easily. So you don't need to worry about keeping it particularly square. We can fix a lot of those problems later, and we are going to clad this whole bottom section in foam bricks. So, alright, I should do this on camera. So I'm going to apply hot glue down one side and down the bottom, and then I'm going to attach it here. And like I said, don't worry so much much about keeping it sort of straight or square. In one respect, having it just a little bit crooked helps sell that it's a real thing. One of the problems you often get with laser cut scenery is that it's just a little too perfect, which means that any mistakes that the person assembling it makes really start to sort of show. And here you can see how what I was saying about most terrain, especially when you're building buildings, is just about assembling a series of boxes. Sort of really starts to come into play. This is going to be a house, but it's also just a box. That glue was thankfully cool enough that I didn't burn myself on it. And so, just like that, we've now got ourselves the first story of our building. Just a quick check of the chat. So hot glue will melt foam. There are ways that you can sort of stop it, but here it doesn't really matter because it turns out that the hot glue, as it melts the foam, sort of fills its place. And because we're just interested in foam core as the sort of body of it, it's not super problematic. But if you are actually building something out of proper foam, it doesn't matter. So, well, that's something you're going to have to actually worry about. And so when we get to making putting the bricks on, there is special foam-safe glue called Yoo-Hoo Pour. There's also in America and Australia, I think you can get a brand of glue called Styrogoo or Styrogur, which, much the same, doesn't melt styrofoam, which is what all of this stuff is in the end. So now we've just got some more of the parts, and it's this part that we care about here, the upper floor. So one of the things I will point out here whilst I'm cutting this part out, you'll notice that we've got two roof sections and one of them has got this notch cut out. We are going to have to cut these two bits out because we're going to have to know where to place the tower. But if you wanted the tower to be somewhere else, you could just cut this out straight and then cut the notch out later. But I'm assembling it as designed because I designed it, and it'd be a bit weird for me to go, now I'm going to do something different on the first time I built this. Corners often present problems when cutting out stuff like this because the material is thick and your blade has an angle. So we will just place the upper floor on top of the lower bit, probably that way just to hide the bend. But in order to know where we want to position it, before we do this, we will start building the upper floor onto this. And then we can position it with these in the right place. So the first thing to do is cut out the remaining pieces for the upper floor, which also includes a number of pieces which aren't just rectangles. Because a lot of the pieces that I've been cutting out thus far are just rectangles. How is the camera angle for you? One of the things I was a little bit concerned about is there's not a huge amount of distance here. So, as I take these pieces, we've now got these. So, as I was saying about stuff just being boxes, here we've got the tented roof, gable ends. I'm not an architect, but when building your own stuff, keeping in mind that you can just kind of wing boxes and then stick triangles on top is like a core part of becoming a terrain builder, and realizing that I can just make a whole load of boxes and cover this battlefield in houses. Or if you're building like a model railway layout, the number of people I know who prototype model railway layouts by just laying like the sidey bits. Yes. People who sort of prototype model railway layouts by just taking a whole bunch of boxes from all sorts of stuff and laying them out to sort of get a feel for where they want buildings and how big and how many, and is it going to overpower a bit of it. And I guess if you were doing this for wargaming, you could sort of do the same and maybe try playing a game or two with prototype versions of scenery, which is just boxes made of foam core. So here I'm almost done cutting parts. One thing I do often suggest is if you cut just like a small piece of something scrap and place it under the hot end of the hot glue gun, you can then avoid getting hot glue on wherever you're working. Signed, someone who has had to get hot glue off of tables and mats and people because you've forgotten that hot glue melts. May as well actually just cut that part out properly now. So whilst this is a little bit of the boring bit, it's also important to pay attention whilst doing all of this, because any mistakes you make now will be very hard to rectify. So it's important to not make all your mistakes, get all your mistakes out of the way, and save them for where you can hide them better. Alright, so we're back into the gluing phase. So now we've got two gable ends, or endy bits, sidey bits, whatever you want to call them. I said end of the cutting phase. I'm just going to neaten up the bottom of this, because what did I just say about make your mistakes somewhere where it's easier to hide them? And we're just going to hot glue them onto the sides of this piece to make another box, because like I said, turns out terrain building, mostly making boxes and then hiding them. And not hot gluing your work to your work surface. Oh, and thank you for subscribing. Like, you will get to see all of my future streams, and you will get to see when I talk about my own games, my own work, and also the animations and stuff that I've got planned for the promotion of Solar Dominion. I've been a little bit tied up on some commission work recently, but that's also given me a lovely opportunity to sharpen my skills before So one of the things I love about hot glue is not only does it work fast, not only are there no chemicals to sort of get ill with, as Grandmaster C will know, I get a bit het up about health and safety in hobby spaces, because a lot of the time we're either kids or working with kids and people who maybe don't expect to have to deal with proper like health and safety and stuff. Whereas the worst you can get with hot glue is like a mild scald. You can't seriously injure yourself with a hot glue gun. Not the kind that you can buy at stationers at any rate. If you do manage to seriously injure yourself with a hot glue gun, congratulations on proving me wrong, and I wish you a speedy recovery, but also you're probably an idiot. There are thankfully basically no fumes from a hot glue gun. Signed, someone who once accidentally inhaled way too many superglue fumes, and then walked into a wall. Offcuts are also great for sort of scraping off excess glue. So there, we've got our upper floor, and we've got our lower floor, and then to build our building, we're going to take the upper floor and we're going to put it on the lower floor. But we've also got the tower. And so the first, well, this is where we're going to have to go cut out the rest, well, at least one half of the roof. Because whilst we are going to glue it on now. It will help us position the tower. And the roof, of all things, is going to be one of the things that we're going to hide the most, because this is going to be almost entirely covered in cardboard, which is going to look like tiles. Now, you don't have to cover it in cardboard, you can cover it in other stuff. Once upon a time, I would have said you can do sort of Roman style roofs by cutting up lots of plastic straws, but then we banned plastic straws, and I'm currently investigating the use of paper straws as an alternative, but I think I will let you know if this works as a good alternative. You can also do like lead roofing quite easily with tin foil. Just kind of take strips of tin foil and fold over the edge, and you can make sort of copper or tin roofing. Companies like Green Stuff World sell little machines. I say machines, it's a little wind-up thing that help you make tiny scale corrugated iron sheeting, which, especially if you're doing something like making terrain for a Fallout game or Necromunda, is great, and you can use that to make roofs. Also great as just general purpose, like conversion stuff. Okay, so we've got our roof. We've got a roof bit. You want it to overlap a little bit on the edges. So we're now going to take our hot glue gun and we're going to put 2 lines, beads I should say, of hot glue down the 2 sides. And then we're just going to place and burn ourselves. I literally gave the speech about not burning yourself at the start of this stream, and then I just gave the thing saying that you can't really injure yourself with a hot glue gun, and then what do I go and do? Injure myself with a hot glue gun. And just whilst we're at it, we'll install the other half because it makes sense to do it here and now. And then, just to help give the roof a little bit more stability, I'll just put a bead of hot glue in the top. And actually, I have some masking tape just handy to one side. I will just tape that flat like that. So there, we've got, I mean, this we could start turning into a piece of terrain on its own, but we're going to stick it on top of another piece of terrain to make a bigger piece of terrain. So, we can that was a stupid thing to do, and the fact that this is live means you get to see all of my stupid mistakes in real time instead of me recounting them later. So, one of the reasons that this is always a good idea to double check is somehow I have made a mistake in the design, which I will rectify, but I guess it's part of just the tolerances. But this is why I say check stuff and there'll be a degree of finessing. So this doesn't fit here because the foam core, for whatever reason, is a little bit bigger than I was expecting. So all we need to do is we just need to take a mark of how off we are, and then we can use our handy dandy clear ruler to extend that line across, and then just need to cut it. And now it fits pretty well. We'll be hiding the gaps with coffee stirrers mostly. Oh yes. So there is one more part of the tower I haven't cut out yet, which we're going to do now. So now, much as we did earlier, we now just need to correct the other half of the tower top. And then we can begin constructing the tower itself. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the tower section to the upper floor house. So here you can see that it's starting to be more than just a box. We're starting to hide more of just the fact that we've glued some boxes together. Like I said earlier, a lot of terrain building is the art of building a box and convincing someone you've built a palace. So from here we can now actually glue it down. So I'm going to want to stick hot glue all around the edge here. And then on all of the surfaces here that are going to touch bits over there. And then glue the whole thing down to. Alright, and so we got ourselves the basics of the watchtower. The one remaining part is to put the other half of the tower on, which again, due to tolerances, I think because I've ended up making it a little But this is a good example of what I was saying earlier about being able just to kind of wing it a lot of the time. You can just attach, you can just start building like a box, and as you go figure out, okay, well, stuff needs to be so large so what I was just doing there is trimming it flush, because that's a place where a couple of things need to meet. Alright, now the one remaining part of this that we need to build before we can go ahead and start making start doing stuff like putting bricks on is the actual tower roof, and we're going to do that much in the same way that we built this bit. So I'm going to take this away, and we've just got a handful of pieces left to cut out. So but hopefully you can start to see how you could apply these techniques to building other stuff, be it if you wanted to build like a little farmhouse, or if you wanted to build like a sci-fi building for 40k or Necromunda. You could very easily just sort of add some gothic decoration to a building like this, and suddenly, surprise, you've got like a 40k worshiporium or something. Laundryporium. No, never took Latin at school. Probably shows. So the roof here is a lot more simple, just because there's no outcroppings. The astute will have noticed that there's no chimney in this design, and that's because I tend to actually make my chimney out of little foam bricks. I find that it looks nicer than just making like a little foam core box. although it all depends on how you actually plan on finishing it. One technique that I know a lot of people like is to take air drying clay. DAS, I should say. DAS is a common brand that you can pick up typically very cheap. In the UK, it's almost always on sale at a shop called The Works. Anyone from the UK will be familiar with The Works as the shop that is always going out of business or shutting down. I have no idea how they get away with perpetually being shutting down. So, much as before, we're just going to apply a bead of hot glue here to stop what happened last time. And we're just going to glue the pieces together. So one piece of advice: if you do get hot glue somewhere where it really can't be, and it's dried, you can take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and just sort of rub down where it's gotten stuck, and that'll, for reasons that are unknown to me but chances are known to science, just loosen it right up. I hope science knows. One other thing that hot glue's got going for it is that it's cheap. You who pour the glue, this stuff, which I use for gluing foam to foam, because you really shouldn't use hot glue for proper foam because it'll melt it. A single tube of that stuff costs as much as an entire pack of glue sticks. And then, much like before, we're just then going to glue the roof on, being careful to leave an overlap both on the sides but not at the top. And again, this could just be a little house if you wanted to like make a little hovel or something. Be very easy just to build this and stop here. There's no requirement saying that every build has to be huge. It's just that's what I like to make. This is also a good opportunity to show the fact that whilst hot glue sticks relatively quickly, it's still workable. It's got a working time of about a minute usually. It's actually quite warm here today, so it's possibly going to stay workable, pliable, pliant is the word I'm looking for some time. I say some time, a minute to 90 seconds. But with that built, we can bring back the building but this would make a lovely little centerpiece for an Age of Sigmar board, or if you're playing something like Saga, or really any kind of pseudo-historical setting. You could make it work for Lord of the Rings. You could probably even, with a little bit of modification, make it work for something like bot action. So it's now a little bit unwieldy to actually show it on camera. That is something I'm going to have to look into how I can fix. But the foam core section of this construction is complete, and I will drop a link on Twitter, on Facebook, in the Discords as to where you can find the plans. They are on Gumroad. They are, however, up for free. I will, as this series continues, I will update the plans with more instructions about how we're going to do like the bricks or the brickwork, and how we're going to do like the timber cladding, just to give you a brief rundown of how it's actually going to look. Like the image you can see on the right hand side shows, this bottom floor is going to be stone, brick, but then this upper section and the top of the tower are going to be half timbered, so Tudor buildings, that kind of archetypical fantasy style. But then this tower is going to be entirely wooden. It's a style of building I saw in a place in Cornwall that I just like, but I was struggling to find proper reference material for it. So who knows? I may have misremembered. I may be making it up, but it's going to look nice. So I'm going to call that part 1, and I'm going to call that a wrap here. Thank you very much to the people who've tuned in. I'm going to try and make a habit out of this. At this point, I'm not going to say whether or not I'm going to do weekly, or whether or not I'm going to... Well, I will try and do the next part next week, but I'm thinking in terms of actual schedule, fortnightly is probably better. In terms of content going forwards, probably about 1/3 little projects like this, stuff that you can just do at home that's got no relation to any of the other stuff that I work on, just because I really want to help share the tools, techniques that I've been taught to do stuff like this. 1/3 I'll try and show off working on stuff for stuff like Solar Dominion. I said the word stuff a lot. And 1/3 doing projects related to Solar Dominion or other stuff that Shearwood Games is working on directly. So one of the big things I've got coming up planned is building a space station. That'll be applicable, whilst it'll be mostly focused towards Solar Dominion, it'll be equally applicable to Battlestar Galactica or Fleet Tactics or Red Alert or X-Wing. So yeah. Thank you very much for tuning in. I will go away and ruminate on how I can improve the camera situation, because actually working on something this big isn't really working. maybe if I raise the camera up just a little bit, you can also see how shaky my hands are, and the masking tape that I've put down so that I can see actually what the camera can see. So maybe if anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed that enough to come join me next time. It's going to actually stop. Has it stopped?